Every single day, a Roman soldier woke up before sunrise, strapped 40 kilograms of equipment to his body, and marched 30 kilometers through whatever the world threw at him. Rain. Snow. Desert heat. Mountain terrain. 40 kilograms. That's roughly 90 pounds. The weight of a full-grown adult. On his back. Every day. For years. And here's the part that breaks your brain: this wasn't punishment. This wasn't a death sentence. This was standard operating procedure for the most successful military machine the ancient world ever produced. So how did ordinary men carry the weight of another human being across half the known world, and still arrive ready to fight? Let's start with a simple question. Why would any army do this to its own soldiers? Picture a Roman legion on the move. 6,000 men, stretching across the road like a slow-moving river of iron and leather. No trucks. No supply convoys trailing safely behind. No helicopters dropping food and ammunition to forward positions. Just men. And whatever those men could carry on their backs. This was Rome's greatest logistical gamble. And it paid off for 500 years. But the weight wasn't random. It wasn't cruelty. Every single pound served a purpose inside a system so carefully designed that removing any one piece of it could collapse the entire operation. By the time this story is done, you'll understand why Rome's soldiers carried what they carried. You'll understand why the weight made them stronger, not weaker. And you'll understand why every modern military on Earth still uses a version of this same brutal, elegant system. Let's build the load from the ground up. Start with the feet. Roman soldiers wore caligae. Heavy sandals with iron hobnails hammered into thick leather soles. These weren't comfortable. They weren't meant to be. They were weapons in themselves. On soft ground, the hobnails gripped like cleats. On stone roads, Rome's famous road network, they clicked and sparked with each step. They also lasted. A good pair of caligae could handle hundreds of miles before wearing out. And a soldier who couldn't march was a soldier who couldn't fight. Add those boots to the calculation. A pair of caligae weighed roughly 1 kilogram. Not much. But nothing was nothing in Rome's weight system. Moving up the body, the tunic. Wool. Heavy, warm, and miserable in summer heat. But wool had a property Roman soldiers had learned to appreciate through brutal trial and error. Wet wool still insulates. Cotton soaks through and kills you with cold. Wool keeps you alive. One tunic. Maybe a spare. Add another kilogram. Now the armor. Here's where the weight starts to get serious. A lorica segmentata, the iconic banded iron armor most people picture when they think of Roman soldiers, weighed approximately 9 kilograms. That's 20 pounds of overlapping iron plates, articulated to allow movement, strapped across the chest, shoulders, and back. It didn't go on easy. Soldiers helped each other strap in every morning. The process took time. Discipline. Cooperation. Without a tent mate helping you fasten the rear buckles, you were vulnerable. This is by design. Rome built dependency into the equipment. Soldiers needed each other just to get dressed. That dependency created unit cohesion before the fighting even started. Add 9 kilograms of armor. Add the helmet, a galea, bronze or iron, weighing another 2 to 3 kilograms. Cheek guards. Neck guard. A crest on certain ranks. The helmet alone felt like wearing a bowling ball on your head for 8 hours straight. But we're not done. Not even close. The shield. The scutum. This was Rome's defining piece of battlefield technology. A curved rectangular tower of layered wood, covered in leather, edged in iron or bronze, with a central iron boss for blocking strikes. It weighed between 5 and 10 kilograms depending on construction. Some accounts put campaign-ready scuta at the heavier end. Soldiers carried them in a leather cover during march to protect them from rain and damage. When fighting came, the cover came off. And that shield went up. Together with armor and helmet, a Roman soldier was already carrying somewhere between 16 and 22 kilograms before touching a single supply item. And the supplies were just beginning. Every Roman soldier on campaign carried what the army called his sarcina. His personal pack. It hung from a forked wooden pole called a furca, balanced across the shoulder to distribute weight and keep the hands free for the weapon. The furca itself weighed less than a kilogram. Simple, brilliant engineering. The pole meant the pack didn't compress against the body. Airflow. Less overheating. Slightly less misery. What was in the sarcina? Start with food. Rome fed its soldiers with remarkable consistency by ancient standards, but on campaign, each man carried his own supply. Hardtack biscuits called bucellatum. Dense. Heavy. Nearly indestructible. 3 days' worth weighed roughly 2 kilograms and tasted like seasoned wood. Soldiers soaked them in vinegar or water before eating, which softened them just enough to chew without breaking teeth. A small pouch of pasca, vinegar mixed with water, the army's standard drink. It killed bacteria in questionable water supplies without the soldier knowing that's what it was doing. They just knew it kept them alive. Dried meat, salt, lentils, or grain depending on availability. Sometimes an onion. Sometimes nothing. Total food weight for a 3-day march, 3 to 4 kilograms. Add cooking equipment. A small bronze pot. A folding iron grill. Soldiers didn't eat at restaurants. They cooked in the field, in groups of 8 men called a contubernium, the same 8 men who shared a tent, who helped each other armor up, who fought side by side. Cooking equipment per man, roughly 1 to 2 kilograms shared across the group. Each man carried part of the collective kit. Now add personal items. A cloak called a sagum, heavy wool, doubling as a blanket when temperatures dropped. Another 2 kilograms. A bronze mess tin. Spare sandal leather. A small tool kit with a hand saw, a pickaxe head, a turf cutter, and a basket for moving earth. That tool kit deserves special attention. Because it reveals something most people completely miss about how Rome actually won wars. Rome didn't just march to battles. Rome marched to positions. And at every position, every single night without exception, Rome built a fortified camp. Not a rough campfire with bedrolls scattered around. A proper fortified camp with a ditch, a wall, gateways, streets, designated areas for each unit, a command tent, latrines. Every night. From scratch. In a matter of hours. And every soldier carried the tools to build it. The pickaxe head weighed roughly 1 kilogram. The turf cutter another half kilogram. The basket for moving excavated earth, folded flat, added more weight. This is the piece of the puzzle that changes everything. Rome's soldiers weren't just infantry. They were mobile construction crews. Combat engineers who happened to carry swords. The camp wasn't luxury. It was survival strategy. An army sleeping behind walls and ditches was an army that couldn't be surprised at 3 in the morning by an enemy who'd been watching them move all day. Enemies learned this quickly. Attacking a Roman column on the march was dangerous. Attacking a Roman camp at night was nearly impossible. The fortifications that seemed excessive, the tools that seemed too heavy to bother carrying, were the reason entire enemy strategies failed before a single sword was drawn. Total sarcina weight, between 14 and 17 kilograms depending on the specific campaign, the season, and the supply situation. Add the primary weapon. The pilum. A pilum wasn't just a spear. It was an engineering achievement designed for one specific purpose, to destroy an enemy's defensive capability in the first 3 seconds of engagement. The pilum had a heavy iron shank attached to a wooden shaft. Total weight, 2 to 3 kilograms. On impact, the iron shank was designed to bend on contact, making the pilum impossible to pull out of a shield and throw back. If it hit a shield, it stuck. The enemy soldier now had a bent metal rod hanging off his shield, dragging it down, making it impossible to raise. Rome's soldiers were trained to throw both pila in sequence, one at range, one at close range, then immediately draw the gladius and close the distance while the enemy was still dealing with the weight of 2 embedded spears in his shield. The gladius itself, short, wide, devastatingly effective in tight formations. Another half kilogram to 1 kilogram on the hip. A Pugio dagger on the other hip. Another half kilogram. Add it up.
Best meal I've had in
Armor,
weeks.
helmet, shield, pack, weapons, tools, food, cooking gear, cloak. Somewhere between 35 and 45 kilograms. 80 to 100 pounds. And they marched with this for 30 kilometers a day. Not occasionally. Every day on campaign. 4 weeks. 4 months. Sometimes for years. Now let's talk about what that actually felt like. Because there's a difference between understanding weight as a number and understanding what carrying that weight does to a human body over time. The first hour of march was manageable. Soldiers had done it hundreds of times. Muscle memory took over. The body adapted to the familiar discomfort. By the third hour, the shoulders were burning. The furka pole transferred the pack's weight efficiently, but efficiently doesn't mean painlessly. Pressure points formed. Bruises developed where straps met skin. The armor was the worst. 9 kilograms of iron plates, constantly in motion, grinding slightly against the body with each step. After an hour, you stopped noticing it. After 5 hours, you couldn't stop noticing it. Feet swelled inside the caligy. The hobnails that gripped the road on the way down turned into tiny torture devices on the way back up, transferring impact through iron into the sole of the foot. Blisters formed, popped, hardened into calluses, then blistered again. Junior soldiers, new recruits called tirones, experienced something their bodies had never prepared them for. Not just muscle fatigue. Systemic exhaustion. A kind of full-body depletion that made the simple act of stopping feel like salvation. But stopping wasn't always an option. The column didn't wait for sore feet. The column moved at the pace of the army. You either kept up or faced consequences that made sore feet sound pleasant. Centurions walked the column. These were Rome's sergeants. Experienced, brutal, carrying a vine staff, a symbol of rank that doubled as an instrument of immediate correction. A soldier lagging behind the column without cause could expect the vine staff across the back without warning or apology. Not because the centurion was cruel. Because one soldier falling behind the column could create a gap that could be exploited in ambush terrain. In the forests of Germania or the mountain passes of Gaul, a gap in the column was an invitation to disaster. The collective pressure of the system made individuals perform beyond what they believed possible. This is what modern sports science calls a socially facilitated performance enhancement. Roman commanders didn't have that terminology. They had vine staffs. Same result. By midday, the column halted. This break was called the ora sexta pause, the 6th hour rest. Soldiers dropped their packs. Not carelessly. Carefully, in formation, within reaching distance, because an enemy could appear even during rest. They ate. Fast. Hardtack. A swig of Posca. Maybe something dry. Then they were moving again. By the time the column reached the day's campsite, chosen in advance by scouts and engineering officers, every man in that column was operating on reserve energy. Muscles aching. Feet damaged. Backs compressed from hours of load bearing. And now the work began. Because the camp didn't build itself. Units were assigned sections of the perimeter. Each man knew his job before arrival because it was the same job at every camp, in the same location, following the same plan. Rome didn't improvise fortifications. Rome reproduced them. The ditch first. 2 meters wide, 1 meter deep, circling the entire camp. Every soldier dug his section with the tools he'd carried all day. The pickaxe broke the ground. The turf cutter shaped the blocks. The basket moved the earth. Then the wall. Turf blocks stacked into a rampart, topped with sharpened stakes. Each soldier also carried, pila muralia, 2 wooden stakes per man, another kilogram of load that suddenly made complete sense the moment you saw them being hammered into the rampart top. The entire camp, ditch, wall, gates, internal streets, tent areas, could be completed in 2 to 3 hours by a disciplined legion that had done it hundreds of times. Then and only then did soldiers eat their evening meal. A proper meal. Cooked over the fire. Porridge, beans, meat when available. Rome fed its soldiers better than most ancient civilians ate. The army understood that an underfed soldier was a dead soldier. Then sleep. In the leather tent shared with 7 other men from the Cantaburnium. 8 men per tent. The tent weighed roughly 30 kilograms total, divided among the 8. Another 4 kilograms per man in the Sarcina. Sleep lasted until the first watch of the next morning. Then the process began again. Now let's talk about what happened to soldiers who couldn't maintain this standard. Because Rome had answers for that too. And they were not gentle answers. A soldier who repeatedly failed to maintain march pace faced formal punishment. Extra duties. Reduced rations. Public humiliation within the unit, which in Rome's army was perhaps worse than physical punishment because shame within the Cantaburnium damaged relationships that kept men alive in battle. A soldier who abandoned his equipment, dropped his pack to move faster, discarded his tools without authorization, faced more severe consequences. Equipment was expensive. Equipment was the property of Rome. Losing it was treated like losing money that belonged to the state. And a soldier who deserted the column entirely during campaign faced the ultimate sanction. Capital punishment by the same soldiers he'd abandoned. Rome did not build its military machine on enthusiasm. It built it on systems. Rewards for compliance, punishment for failure, and a structure so complete that individual failure threatened collective survival in ways every soldier could see and feel. But here's what makes this remarkable. Despite all of that weight, despite all of that discipline, despite all of that punishment lurking at the edges of non-compliance, soldiers served. For 20 years. By choice.
His burden was immense.
Because service paid.
The equivalent weight of
Literally.
another adult human.
A Roman legionary earned a salary in a world where most people bartered for goods. He ate regularly in a world where food insecurity was normal. He received medical care. Rome's military medical system was centuries ahead of civilian standards. He retired with a land grant or a cash payment that set him up for the rest of his life. The weight, the distance, the discipline, they were the price of admission to the most stable, well-fed, well-paid, well-protected career available to a young man in the ancient world. Most soldiers knew this. The recruits who didn't figure it out quickly either adapted or disappeared from the historical record. Now compare this to what other armies were doing. Carthaginian forces under Hannibal were some of Rome's most dangerous opponents. Brilliant tactics. Devastating cavalry. The ability to destroy Roman armies in open battle. But Hannibal's army relied heavily on a supply train. Wagons. Animals. Supply routes that could be raided, disrupted, or cut off entirely. When Rome disrupted Hannibal's supplies through the strategy of attrition, avoiding pitched battle, raiding supply lines, denying him the decisive engagement he needed, Hannibal's army slowly starved in Italy despite winning nearly every battle they fought. Rome's soldiers carried their own supplies. Rome's soldiers built their own defenses. Rome's soldiers were the supply chain. Cutting them off from external support didn't cripple them the way it crippled every other ancient army, because external support wasn't the primary plan. Medieval armies, more than 1,000 years later, still hadn't fully replicated this system. Feudal levies relied on foraging, essentially theft from local populations, which slowed movement, alienated potential allies, and created unpredictable availability. Professional medieval armies used supply trains that created logistical vulnerabilities Rome had engineered away by putting the supplies on the soldiers' backs. Even in the modern era, when mechanized transport seemed to make foot soldier loads irrelevant, military planners discovered something uncomfortable. Vehicles break down.
Every piece
Roads
of the
get destroyed.
Gear, meticulously
Fuel runs
crafted
out.
and maintained,
The soldier
formed a
who can
perfectly
carry enough to
engineered
survive
system of
independently,
war.
even for 3 days, is still more reliable than any supply chain in contested terrain. The United States Marine Corps studied Roman march loads while developing their own load-bearing standards. British paratroopers in the Falklands marched with loads comparable to Roman soldiers across terrain that would have felt familiar to legionaries in Scotland. The 90 pounds didn't go away. It just got transferred to different equipment for different wars. So why did Roman soldiers carry 90 pounds every day? Not because their commanders were sadists. Not because they didn't understand the cost of such loads on the human body. They carried 90 pounds because every single item in that load was a piece of an interconnected system that made the Roman army functionally self-sufficient in a world where self-sufficiency was the difference between an army that won and an army that disappeared. The food meant independence from supply lines. The tools meant safety every single night. The armor meant surviving the battle. The weapons meant winning it. The sharpened stakes meant that even a sleeping army was a defended army. Remove any piece and the system weakened. Keep all the pieces and you had the most effective military force the ancient world ever produced, capable of projecting power across 3 continents for 500 years. The weight wasn't a burden. It was the system itself. Made physical. Strapped to every soldier's back. 30 kilometers at a time. Here's a question worth sitting with. We live in an era of drones, precision missiles, satellite navigation, and mechanized everything. And yet military forces around the world still train their soldiers to carry extreme loads across extreme distances. What does it say about warfare, and about human capability, that the most fundamental technology of the Roman soldier is still considered essential training for the most advanced militaries on Earth 2,000 years later? And if you think 90 pounds was the heaviest burden a Roman soldier carried, wait until you hear about the psychological weight of what Rome required its soldiers to do to their own comrades when discipline broke down. That story might be the darkest thing Rome ever built into its military system. That video is coming next.